Welcome into a Thursday, February 6th edition of Daily Faceoff Live. Tyler Yaremchuk and Frank Seravalli with you. The show, as always, is a presentation of Bet365. Download the app today. Use the promo code NATION. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Over in the Daily Faceoff YouTube chat, we're looking for your input on our poll question, and we're looking for your hashtag AskDFO inbox questions as well. Jon Goyens is going to swing by in a little bit with the coaches room. But first, Frank, we're like, what? Just over 72 hours away from the Super Bowl, maybe a little bit further than that. Are you nervous at all for this, or are you just excited to watch the game?
Not nervous. I mean, it's all in good fun. I love everyone picking the Chiefs. Go ahead. Do it.
Hey, fair enough. I already said it. I'm doing the old emotional hedge. I'm betting on the Chiefs, but cheering for the Eagles because I would love to see your Eagles win, but listen, I got Mahomes PTSD a little bit. I at least if he wins, I'll be upset, but I'll have some money in my bank account.
Yeah, and I would say of all their seasons, though, this has probably been the least impressive of them. So
yeah,
I think they're ripe. Let's go.
Fair enough. All right, let's kick things off, Frank, with a look back at last night. It is our nightcap brought to you by JP Weisers, proud to be the official whiskey of the NHL, offering Canadian hockey fans a premium drink choice to enhance every game night experience across the country. JP Weisers, the official whiskey of game night. And let's go out to New York, Frank, where the Rangers picked up another win and a pretty impressive one. JT Miller, we talked about it after his first two games. He seemed to be fitting in really well. That trend has kind of continued. I love this video of him sitting with Zibanejad, Fox, and Panarin before a power play, and he's drawing up plays. He's telling them where he wants everybody to go, and he's sliding in great. But one of the, I don't know if you want to call it an unintended ripple effect of this, but the way Mika Zibanejad has played since moving over to the right wing, 6 points in 3 games, man, that is a very nice perk for the Rangers. That, like, yes, you added JT Miller, and holy crap, you basically added the old Mika Zibanejad back.
It just takes so much pressure off, right? No longer does Mika Zibanejad have to be the driver. He can go back to being a complementary piece and a really well-paid and expensive one at that. But when he's on, he's incredibly productive. And not only that, but the biggest glaring weakness was that Mika Zibanejad, in my opinion, couldn't play the style that they needed for a center in that role. And Miller has the compete level to do it. And beyond that, look, I think for a team that really lacked juice, the New York Rangers get that in JT Miller. And so it's not just the production. Like, these things that we're seeing JT Miller do, this is what he used to do with the Vancouver Canucks. That, drawing up plays, just his head is so focused in the game and he wants to win so badly that I think you can't help but have that be infectious with the rest of the team.
Yeah, really kind of like weird low event hockey game last night. The shots were only 22-17. Igor Shesterkin played fine, but again, only had to face 17 shots. The Rangers special teams also stood out as well. Not only were they 3 for 3 on the penalty kill, but the game-winning goal came from Chris Kreider, and it was a shorthanded marker from Zibanejad and Fox. So even Chris Kreider is a guy, as much as there's been chatter this year about how effective he can still be, Frankie's up to 16 goals on the season now, even maybe a little bit of pressure taken off him, even though he's not necessarily playing a ton with JT Miller, but he's allowed to just kind of be Chris Kreider and be a middle six support guy.
He needs to be more than that. He's got to be another driver for this team. This season has been utterly disappointing and a disappointment for Chris Kreider. I understand his name was out there in trade talks. I understand he hasn't also been healthy all season long, but if the New York Rangers are going anywhere, they need Chris Kreider to be a driver, not a passenger.
Yeah, and they could also use Igor Shesterkin getting back to his Igor level. Joe says it. He's a resident Rangers fan, or one of them in the chat. Igor needs to be better. Simple. He's had a rough go over the last 2 weeks. If there's anyone I'm not concerned about.
Just picked him up.
Yeah, Quick has picked him up. The value of having a tandem, and also like I can just see Shesterkin going on a heater later on in the season. So we start in New York, one side of the JT Miller trade. Let's go to Vancouver, and again, quickly after trading away Miller, they flip the first round pick. They get Marcus Pettersson. They beef up their blue line, Frank, and last night they announced a 6-year extension for their newly acquired defenseman. Pettersson gets a $5.5 million AAV on the deal. I guess just kind of first thoughts, surface level on this one. Frank, what do you think of the Canucks locking him up?
I think a fair deal for both sides. I was asked on Vancouver radio yesterday morning what I thought a prospective deal could look like. My guess was 5 years times 5.5. So they stretch a little bit on the term. The AAV at 5 years, it's telling you that it probably would have been closer to the 5.8 range or so. So they're able to keep the AAV down in that 5.5 million range. And we'll see. Let's see what kind of impact that Pettersson has on this defense core. The Vancouver Canucks are obviously thrilled with the transaction. They're excited to have him locked up. It does change the perspective of the deal. No longer trading for a rental. This is now someone that is part of your future plans. And I'm just real curious to see what kind of world he ends up in terms of how much he changes the complexion of this Vancouver team. There's been seemingly it's on either pole, and I guess maybe to be expected in today's world and that we live in, where it's either right or left depending on how you look at it. Pettersson is either on one hand a top 5 shutdown defenseman in the entire NHL, or he's a number 5 defenseman. There's a lot of ground between here and there, but I tend to believe that yes, he is much closer to a 4-5 if you look at his minutes. Even going back to Pittsburgh, he's played on a really bad team, and he's been readily available for a couple years now. Why is it, if he's such a great fit for the Vancouver Canucks and what he wanted to do, why didn't they go out and get him before? That's the question I'll keep asking. And the bigger question is, had they hung on to that really valuable first round pick, what other defenseman could they have gotten their hands on that might be a better fit? That's all.
Well, and I thought you made a really interesting point this morning on the DFO rundown, and we can call it sort of like deadline goggles when you view a player. But like, let's say Marcus Pettersson
it's beer goggles, like when it's 1:45 in the morning and you're about to get kicked the hell out. I'm not, saying it's exactly in this case. The Canucks are bringing home a 2. That's not what I'm saying. But it's, if Marcus Pettersson had 2 years left on his deal, like, I don't know that anyone ever talks about him at the deadline. We just
and this is going to tie in a little bit to like our cap dumps topic that we're going to get to in a few minutes. But like, again, yeah, if Pettersson had 2-3 more years, 5.5 million, he sure as shit ain't getting a first round pick in return. It's probably more viewed like a guy, Rickard Rakell, for example. And it's like, hey, if they could get out of that money, nice, because you don't want money tied up in veterans.
This was a second round pick that was traded, but the Pittsburgh Penguins bought themselves into a first. That's the other part that no one has really talked about. You take on the extra year of Desharnais and Danton Heinen. I mean, the Penguins had Danton Heinen. They could have easily kept him. They didn't want to pay him. Now he had a rough start in Vancouver. Desharnais was healthy scratch and trade bait. You're throwing those players into the deal to make it a first. So in the end, it kind of really, the real price was a second.
Yeah, and I guess, again, sort of in defense of Vancouver here, if you look at the Heinen and Desharnais money for next year, you're basically only paying $1 million more now, and you have the best player out of that trio. So trimming the fat on the books is fine.
But I'm just laughing at some of the coverage that's resulted from this because, depending on where you look, spectacular, unbelievable contract, like all these, like, just like slow your roll. Like, I'm telling you, just give it some time here, because like, he is what he is. He's not a savior. I'm telling you right now.
Yeah. Again, the percentage of the cap thing, I think that's going to be a buzzword we hear a lot about over the next sort of 12 to 18 months here as new deals get signed. It's about 4.8% of the cap by year 3, when the cap is, again, north of $110 million. That's the equivalent of, in today's dollars, a $4 million defenseman. So I think this contract should
Which is exactly what he was making, which is exactly number 4 or 5 defenseman money. Like, he's still even being paid as a number 4 or 5 defenseman, and yet I continue to be crushed by it. Okay.
I'm with you, Frank. And again, you made some great points on the rundown about how, like, you've nailed a lot of stuff in Vancouver, both positive and negatively. It's not like you're a hater of any
I'm just
one
a
team.
realist. Yeah. If you're expecting him to come in and be a savior for this team, you're just, that's not what he is.
Yeah.
Not saying he can't be a good player or an impact piece. Not saying that at all. He better be for a first round pick.
Yeah. All right. Let's stick in Vancouver. Another defenseman, Quinn Hughes. Some headlines circulating about him. Rick Tocchet yesterday was asked about Hughes and his potential availability for the Four Nations Faceoff next week. And Tocchet said, quote, "It will depend on the next 48 hours. We'll sit down with Quinn and talk to him like every player. You're concerned about safety and health." And again, how badly a player wants to go to the Four Nations obviously is a determining factor in a lot of this. But also, there could be more awkward conversations around the league in the next 48 hours, right, Frank? Like, I'm sure the Canucks are sitting there going, hey, this isn't the Olympics. Quinn, we are tied for a playoff spot. You're a borderline Hart Trophy finalist this year. We need you in the lineup more than we need you going and having fun with Team USA.
Yeah, but good luck telling Quinn Hughes that. I mean, how do you tell someone first best on best competition that we've had in 10 years, 11 years, and you got to sit out preemptively? Yeah. I mean, look, this guy has grinded through a lot this year. I look at it and I understand wholeheartedly where teams are coming at it from this perspective. We're paying you major money to be a star that helps lift us into the postseason. If you aren't here, we got no shot. But there has to be some carrot in it for the player. The enjoyable nature of the competition and also the chance to play with your brother, that has to stand out in a big, big way. But he's not alone. The conversation is just a totally different one for Sidney Crosby and the Pittsburgh Penguins, or Zach Werenski and the Columbus Blue Jackets. Each individual circumstance is unique. For Alex Pietrangelo, gold medal Olympic winner for Team Canada, a one-off, made-up, no historical context international tournament that replaces the All-Star game is not going to move the needle. It's not going to have the same effect on Quinn Hughes as it does Sidney Crosby. It just is different. This is a totally different generation of players. And there are going to be a lot of difficult conversations along the way. I mean, Anthony Seravalli, he's on watch as well for Team Canada. He's not practicing today. It feels like, for whatever reason, we averted absolute crisis when it comes to these rosters for 7 weeks. We didn't have one player that was named to the team that went down with a long-term injury for 7 whole weeks after that. Now it feels like every game, every time you turn around, you're on Four Nations alert.
Yeah, I mean, Finland basically has no defenseman going now. Like, that's been a whole nother story. You mentioned Sidney Crosby. Just for an update on that, he did take to the ice today at Penguins practice. He went for what I think you can describe as a twirl, Frank. He didn't really shoot any pucks, but he handled a few pucks, did some skating. So still kind of unclear, I guess.
Looks very clearly to me like a wrist injury. That was the first thing I thought when I saw the hit, when the collision. If you've broken your wrist that way, you understand what that looks like. And I'm not playing doctor, but that is a wrist getting crunched. And there's a reason why Sidney Crosby isn't taking any shots today. That's it right there. So, I know Jason Gregor, the first thing he was wondering about, is that a hyperextended elbow? I mean, look, again, not playing doctor off of TV, but if you're making passes and you're receiving passes, but you're not shooting, it's probably much more likely a wrist.
Fair enough. Something to keep an eye on here as we head into the weekend. Just sorry, so people know, and I'm putting you on the spot with this. When's the final day of that injury? Like, when do the rosters have to be set?
5 p.m. You can make changes on Monday up until 5 p.m. due to injury. After that, but you can't just make it because you want to make it. Hey, I want to sub out Travis Konechny for Zach Hyman. No. Like, these guys were already named, done deal, only due to injury up until 5 p.m. on Monday. The tournament starts first game Wednesday. And the other thing to keep in mind, the only other way you can add in or sub in a player is if you get below the minimum thresholds for a game. So let's say, you get hit with a rash of injuries during the tournament. If you dip below 18 skaters and 2 goalies, then you can add a player to replace due to injury.
Fair enough. Let's get to our deadline countdown article for today. Scott Maxwell handled it, and it's potential cap dumps ahead of the deadline. A few teams in dollar in, dollar out situations. It's a somewhat interesting group. Frank, I actually wanted to start with Jeff Skinner in this one because I think it's interesting he's on there. Last night, got elevated to the second line with Leon Draisaitl, popped home 2 points. He's played probably his best 2 games as an Oiler over the last 2 nights in St. Louis and Chicago. I actually don't think Jeff Skinner's the one to watch in Edmonton because he has that full no movement clause.
Let me guess. You think Victor Arvidsson?
He doesn't have the trade protection. And if the Oilers are going to do some sort of a big swing, which I do not think they will, I would say it's a sub 5% chance, but like, I think Arvidsson's the guy to watch over Skinner.
That makes sense. Look, Arvidsson and Skinner, both to this point in time this season, haven't held up their end of the bargain. The difference between those two is not just the no trade protection, but I think what's going on with trying to convince someone like Jeff Skinner to come and take less. Like, he had other options on the market and they convinced him, hey, come to Edmonton. We'll give you a great opportunity. You got to take a little bit less. That's hard to then flip on the other end of that, right? And say, hey, hasn't worked. You've got the no trade, but hey, by the way, do you mind waiving it so we can get you out of here? Especially with someone this close to the playoffs. But I do think we've arrived at a really interesting moment because his game hasn't been up to that level. And now he's getting that opportunity to play with Draisaitl and put in a position to put up points potentially that maybe this is where it turns. Arvidsson, I've always viewed as more of a playoff performer. Like, he's the guy that you don't really care what happens during the regular season. Can he get you a couple goals in the playoffs with the net front presence that he has? I think he can. What's going to be really interesting moving forward is Max Domi, because it's the term on his deal with the Toronto Maple Leafs. That third line has been no good. It's been one of the most lifeless in the league, and that's with Bobby McMahon on it right now, having a great season. He was slid down there. They've got to figure something out. And it's really unfortunate for Max Domi, a guy who had played on a series of 1-year deals, finally gets the term in the place that he wants to be with the Toronto Maple Leafs. And now he's not pulling his weight. That's tough.
Yeah, that was the guy I was kind of looking at, and his numbers. Like, again, he's played 125 regular season games now with the Toronto Maple Leafs. He has 12 goals for $3.75 million with 3 more years. You need a whole heck of a lot more than 1 goal every 10 games out of that guy. And I was kind of hoping, like, it's one of the best pieces of GM work I think we've seen in the last decade in the NHL is Montreal getting Sean Monahan and getting a first for taking him, rehabilitating him, shipping him out for a first. And I was looking at this list, kind of hoping I'd get to make some great point about, like, this is the guy that a rebuilding team should look at, scoop up, and in 18 months, they're going to get something for him because he's going to go on a run. I wanted to make that point with Domi because he's only 29, but I just don't think it's there.
Yeah, I'm not seeing it either.
Yeah.
That's their number one mission, is to reinvent that third line when it comes to the trade deadline for the Toronto Maple Leafs. They're well on their way, and looking at that what that market looks like.
All right, let's get to our big segment for the day. It's the Coach's Room with Jon Goyens, and it's brought to you by Charm Diamond Centers. You can check out a large selection of Canadian lab-grown diamonds and mined diamonds by visiting them at their website, charmdiamondcenters.com. Always a pleasure to welcome Jon Goyens to the program, former QMJHL head coach. And today we're zeroing in on the Winnipeg Jets, John. And I want to start with, hey, there's always a lot of talk that it's the Connor Hellebuyck show in Winnipeg, and it is on most nights. But I want to talk about their offense a little bit. They've been one of the most offensive teams in the league when it comes to creating chances. And I guess my question is, does this come from them just being a fundamentally sound hockey team? Or is there a little bit of, like, knowing you have Connor Hellebuyck back there allows you to cheat a little bit?
They don't cheat. They just don't cheat. Before we even fire up the clips, areas where they defend really well, and it'd be really cherry picking or an easy job to just do a whole thing on Connor Hellebuyck. But the reality is they're reducing the amount of opportunities in the slot. So they're in slot defending, which comes in a various amount of ways versus the rush, forecheck, actual attempts, passes to the slot. They're near the top tier in all these categories. So that's not to take anything away from Hellebuyck's job, but it just means how dialed in and how consistent they are. And when you do that, it fuels their offense, because offensively, even though they're number one in most categories, they are not like the most fire wagon type of team. They've become a really consistent team that scores in a variety of ways. And when I say fire wagon, you think cheating with breakaways and just offensive rushes. However, they do it with fundamental defense. And as we fire up these clips, that fundamental defense does lead to several highlight reel goals. And we'll see how quickly they defend 5 guys in a picture. So let's roll.
Oh, there we go.
There we go. 5 guys in a pick, right? It's something coaches are talking about all the time. But I probably even added a second a little late from exactly 200 feet, 5 guys in a pick. Poor defending by Ottawa, but it was up the ice in under 10 seconds and in the back of the net. As an offensive team attacking these guys, you got to face 5 blue jerseys, and you see Connor coming from underneath and then executing an elite skill play. Every time it's back in their zone, every time you see blue jerseys. Now the other part, their forecheck. They sit on options. They force teams to face their own goal line or face the glass to make exit passes, and they're just sitting on guys. And it's not just the first line. Get it in and force teams. And watch this. Here's a hope and poke by Hughes. He's an elite player, but he hoped, he poked, and he lost that battle. And then it's simplicity. Load a high, hammer it on net. Look at the clock here. 10.7 seconds. Everybody's in the pick. 2-1 game, second period, game fundamentals. Get it deep, get in on the forecheck. You don't have to light anyone up, but it was Connor that puts it in deep, Connor that finds the little quiet spot. Again, shot, tip to the corner, 5 guys in the pick. Watch, we're underneath, and it's just the simplicity. Move it, and if you sleep for a second, here's Connor on that breakaway, and the highlight reel goals are coming from fundamentally sound defending as a 5-man unit.
Biggest thing that strikes me watching those clips, John, is this team skates.
They skate.
You look at Kyle Connor coming from the correct posture. He's able to blow by the defenseman because he's moving.
You know, I've been talking to several coaches about this for everything that is supposed to be new in hockey. The way to play the game and the way to win the game hasn't changed. It really hasn't. Fundamentals. The puck moves faster than players, and that's why a guy like Kyle Connor can blow by guys because he's not holding on to it from one end to the other. And everybody's like, oh shit, where do I, oh, I'm going to go offside. Oh, where do I go? No, it's give, go, and explode down the middle. And we learned as we grew up. What moves faster than the puck? Nothing. And they do it so consistently well.
It's a wild clip too, dumping the puck in with 8 seconds left in a period and still scoring a goal. So big question though, when I look at this Jets team is where the heck did this power play come from? They were 24th in the league last season before they got Sean Monahan. It improved significantly and then it went quiet again. How did they go from that with mostly the same core of guys to first in the league?
Listen, Sean Monahan's not there. There was a real Monahan effect when he got there because there was a Monahan effect here in Montreal when he went to the bumper spot. Let's call it a residual effect of Sean Monahan. But the reality
is the ghost of Sean Monahan is what's driving this Jets power play now.
No, but it makes for a good soundbite. It's all about the fact that both units. Okay, so they've scored 15 power play goals since Christmas. Power play number 2 has 4 or 5 of those. Okay. Power play 1 has the rest. The fact that they can score off of entries with speed. They can score off puck battles. They score off all concepts. Like you're not going to go in and go, oh, they play a 1-3-1. They play a spread. It's another team, kind of like what we did with Detroit recently, where 1 second they're an umbrella, 1 second they're a 1-3-1, 1 second they're a spread. And if they can beat you off of a recovered puck, they will and create a lot of quick strikes. And the guy in my first breakdown, when they were 6-0 in October, there were guys like Iafallo and Velarde hadn't had a point yet. Now Velarde is an elite net front presence. I'm going to highlight that guy. Net front presence, he has become elite. Ehlers is wandering around in different spots. And then other guys are reading. And then power play 2, you got probably the best PP2 QB in terms of efficiency. He's 12th in the league for points for defensemen in Neil Pionk. That guy's going to get paid in the offseason. So let's fire up these clips where we start with power play 2 and the variety of ways the Jets can score and make you pay on the power play. So here comes an entry. Both units do this crisscross right here. Right? They crisscross. They have staggered options so they can maintain speed, and they don't force bad plays. If you give them the interior, they're going to take the interior. 45 seconds. Power play 2s across the league get 45, 35 seconds or less. They know that. Nemestikov also having a great year and opportunities on the power play. Quick strike, 10 seconds from one end to the other. And now power play number 2 one more time. Cole Perfetti up top. They're feeling, oh, we got tons of space. There's 4 guys on one side of the ice. So right there, they know that they could kick it back door to Nemestikov. No, now it's PP1. Same type of idea. Quick strike. You give him the interior. Shifley is still making a case to be a replacement. Drives, buries. Loose puck recoveries. You got to open the zone off these. Low to high, simplistic. High to low. You've got no bumper, but Calgary is defending a bumper. And what does Velarde do? Stick available, and he boxes out defenders like no other. He's right in the Hyman type of player, net front. He does such a great job. Now it's the quick strikes. So the clock started after the first strike. After the second strike, 3 strikes in 6.5 seconds. Off of one zone faceoff. Watch where Ehlers goes. This is very hard to defend when you got guys wandering like this, because what it does is it isolates 2 defenders against 1 guy on the back door, opens that pocket of space. And again, the simplicity, move it. Here's a quick strike, recover the puck, move it. Now watch Ehlers and Connor. Watch Connor when he's going to fake this shot, and watch how they just switch. And that allows for this space to open up for Velarde. There's not one power play goal that is identical back to back to back. It's just there. You give them space. It's off a loose puck. They're going to make you pay. And right now, PKs are having a really hard time to figure out the Jets power play.
34%.
Wow.
Yeah, they're going to push for some historic type numbers.
That is crazy. John, as always, appreciate your time, man. Thanks for popping on, and we'll do this again next week.
Have a good weekend.
This is beautiful. I will watch this segment 10 times today from one of the Jets fans in our chat, Turd Ferguson, who has a name I regret reading every time I do it. Let's get to our poll question results here, Frank. I asked a question that was all about Sabres forward Dylan Cozens, and I think the idea of him going to a Canadian team is intriguing. Which Canadian team would be the best fit for Cozens? The Jets won the Twitter poll, and they ran away with the YouTube poll as well, 47% of the votes. What do you make of Cozens as a fit in Winnipeg?
I mean, it's exciting. It would be a great fit cap-wise, age scheme-wise, all those things to help extend the Jets' window. I think he's a better fit for what Calgary needs and wants. Maybe you get the workhorse from Whitehorse a little bit closer to Yukon as well. I don't know. Just a thought. Either way, it'd be fun to have him in Canada.
Calgary was second on both of the polls as well. Let's go to our daily face-off inbox, our daily bets brought to you by Bet365. Download the app today. Use the promo code NATION. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Couple of plays for tonight, including a same gamer. I like backing the Leafs, and I like backing William Nylander. It's interesting to look at the odds board and see the fact that Austin Matthews is always way overpriced compared to William Nylander, who is second in the NHL with 33 goals. You're getting him at like plus 140. You play it with the puck line, it's plus 375. Only need 2 things to happen. I like the price tag there. And one puck line for tonight, or another puck line that I like this evening as well, is the Washington Capitals to cover as they take on the Philadelphia Flyers tonight. So plus 165 on that one too. A couple of juiced up bets here on a Thursday evening. That brings us to garbage time, Frank. And last night, Connor Bedard versus Connor McDavid on national television. Connor McDavid sets up the OT winner. Connor Bedard was making the highlight reels for maybe the wrong reasons. And I found this quote from Paul Bissonnette on the TNT panel to be a pretty interesting little breakdown. Let's take a listen.
There are certain things you can do at certain levels that you cannot do here. Is this one of these things where you just, it's difficult to learn if you're that talented?
Yeah, sometimes I see him continue to try things that aren't going to work at the NHL level, like soft plays that are just going to get picked off and go back the other way. And as much as good he does, is some back the other way. So this is.
Listen, the Hawks are nowhere near the playoff conversation, and I could get some frustration from Bedard, but what do you make of sort of the learning curve we're seeing him struggle with?
I think maybe the part that I'm struggling with is that was Paul Bissonnette, who then also said that he's playing pond hockey. And it wasn't just on TNT, but then on Sportsnet, Colby Armstrong also picked Bedard's game apart. And I'm watching the sequence and I'm going, this is the only guy on the ice for the Chicago Blackhawks that touched the puck. They, regardless of whether or not you thought the Oilers played a good game last night, the Hawks were right there in chances. They had better numbers when it comes to high dangers. You know, the opportunities that Bedard was trying to create. He's a one-legged man in an ass-kicking competition. Like, he's overwhelmed. And he's 19. And I hesitate to find another player that's had this high profile, whose game, and then also, oddly enough, personality at varying points, whether it was Jeremy Roenick with a low blow or whoever it might be. Why is everyone so ready to pick this kid apart? The Chicago Blackhawks, only 2 teams in the league have scored fewer goals than them this year. Do you want them to score a half a goal per game? Like, Bedard is trying to make stuff happen here, and yet all we want to talk about are the negatives, the turnovers, the body language, which is the next thing that always comes up. I agree that he doesn't do himself any favors at times with the way that he comports himself, but I can't think of another star level player who's had to do this much that has gotten his game picked apart in the way that Connor Bedard has. I haven't seen it before. So I guess my big question is why?
Yeah, and someone says Bedard's just tired of losing. I think that's fair. Also, Jeremiah giving a shout out to Pat Maroon on Morning Cup of Hockey, who was awesome about this. And yes, definitely go listen to Pat Maroon's weekly hits with our friends Colby and Johnny. Last night was the first time I'd watched a full Hawks game in a while, Frank. Frank Nazar
Look at that sequence. But
that sequence.
You just see, like, how many times did he touch the puck? Gets it, circles around, gets it again, circles, and then you want to crucify him for the turnover? I just don't get it. I'm sorry, I'm missing it. Maybe I've got blinders on, and I didn't want to cut you off about Frank Nazar because he's been really good the last 20 games. But why do people seem so ready to tear Connor Bedard to shreds? I don't understand.
Yeah, I'm with you. Also, when he does that cycling and touches the puck, count how many strides his teammates take, because he is looking for something and everyone's just kind of going.
They're standing there. They're waiting for him to do something.
Yeah.
So, and he's got no help. By the way, the guy he's zinging it back and forth with, Ryan Donato, he's had a career year, but it's Ryan Donato.
Yeah, I'm with you. But yes, they have a star in Frank Nazar, was my point. 13th overall pick in 2022. He went toe-to-toe with McDavid and Draisaitl on a few shifts, and I was just blown away by him. I think he's so good. Anyways, that is a wrap on today's edition of the show. We went long because we really wanted to talk a little bit about Connor Bedard there. Tomorrow on the show, going to continue doing a little deadline countdown, and we'll get you set for what should be a big weekend in the NHL as teams head towards the Four Nations break, which, just a reminder, we're going to be live in Montreal and Boston doing daily Faceoff live. Boots on the ground as someone will look to win the first and only ever Four Nations Faceoff. We'll see you tomorrow on the show, everybody, noon Eastern. What's up, hockey fans? If you enjoyed that video, then you're going to want to hit the subscribe button to not miss any of our content. From daily live shows with Frank Seravalli to analysis from former NHLers to exclusive interviews with some of the biggest names in the hockey world on Frankly Speaking. You're going to want to hit that subscribe button and stay up to date with everything going on in the hockey world.